Anyway, we don't need to keep going. Olympics, good. But here we are in the middle of our first Sunday within the season of Lent. And we heard from an interesting passage. Of course, the prophets are simply the Old Testament or Hebrew scriptures, sort of stories of people trying to navigate difficult circumstances with God, right? That's what that is. And in the Gospels, those are people too, right? Matthew trying to navigate who we are supposed to be in light of Jesus. So today we will kind of enact and understand as we begin this season of Lent what rooted resistance looks like, what it looks like to turn to the work of imagination in order to heal ourselves and our world. And so the question I have for us is, do you know what many anthropologists consider to be the first sign of civilization? What would you think that would be? You gave it away! Gosh. What would you have said? Maybe. Like pots? I would have said pots. Or I would have said tools. Like they're excavating a site, right? And they find tools or pots. But the answer actually is a healed bone. And actually a healed femur bone is really the most telling. Because that is the hardest bone to set, the hardest bone to heal. Now, do you know why that really kind of is the beginning or understanding in an excavation sense that civilization was here? Do you know why that might be? Yeah, Bernie? People taking care of someone else is the first sign of civilization, right? That actually, in the brutal world of the animal kingdom, in ancient pre-civilization times, if you broke a leg or you were unable to run from danger or hunt for food or get drink or get to the water safely, what happened to you? You died, right? Like that was what was happening, the brutal world. And so a healed, particular femur bone, a healed large bone, is evidence that something happened, that someone was broken, but not left behind. That someone had a terrible, terrible accident or something terrible happened, but they were not left on their own to die. They were cared for and their wounds bound up, and maybe even evidence that they were carried from place to place. They were supported in their recovery. It means someone put their own safety at risk in order to care for the hurt individual. So the true definition of an emerging civilization includes empathy, care, and altruism. Helping someone through difficult pain and a broken moment is really the essence and the ethos of civilization. We are at our best when we are helping others to heal, is what we learn. I don't think we're meant to live this life alone. We're not meant to be cruel to the hurting. We're not meant to leave the wounded unshielded. We're not meant to be unneighborly. Jesus said the greatest commandment was love God and love neighbor, right? Jesus didn't come to uphold rigid rules and inflexible religious traditions. Jesus cared for and healed people. And it made me wonder if the sign of civilization in this way maybe could also be translated in a church setting, right? In a Christian setting. The presence of hurting people who have been healed, not hurt further, and not left behind might be the greatest indication of a healthy or whole or civilized church. Are you with me? Right? In our sermon series, we're challenging ourselves to imagine a new way forward in the midst of the world we're living in, a world full of cruelty and chaos. And so we, as we often do, turn to the scriptures. So we have the prophet's words, right? But seek the welfare of the city where I've sent you into exile and pray to the Lord on its behalf. For its welfare, you will find your welfare in its welfare. Your welfare is bound up in the welfare of your neighbor and other people. And then the gospel story shows us how Jesus was tempted to what? Turn stones to bread, right? Proving he could provide outside of God's desire for equity and equality of resources. He would jump off the temple to show how he could use God to be superstar, right? To be the best. Ruling kingdoms to show how to lead through control and dominance rather than humility and empathy. These two scriptures meet together in a very countercultural, counter-history understanding of who we are to be in this world. They are reminding us what it means to be civilized as Christians, as a church, When we are exiled or in a difficult situation ourselves, we are tempted to sulk, right, and get angry and be difficult and refuse to thrive. So when something doesn't go right, isn't it sort of our nature to be kind of sulky about it? Am I the only one? When I was looking for jobs, there were people that were navigating me flying different places in order to get to interviews and such. And so I have TSA PreCheck, which I actually just found out maybe isn't working, but we don't need to get into that right now. I have TSA PreCheck, so I get to go. Who has TSA PreCheck? I've traveled a lot. You get to go through and you don't have to take off your shoes anymore, or your jacket, and undo your belt and all the things. And when this church had given me this wonderful gift of here's your ticket to fly to us, it didn't include the TSA PreCheck. And I tried to get it in the TSA PreCheck, and I couldn't figure it out how to do it. And so I went through that whole flight experience without TSA PreCheck, and the amount of internal grumbling I did, I had to take off my shoes, because I just hadn't done it. And was it the worst thing in the world? No, I'm fine. I got through it. I had to take my jacket off. It was okay. We all survived it. But I grumbled because I think a lot of us, when we are put in situations that are unpleasant or unexpected, like God's people, right? As Jeremiah is talking about, we tend to grumble. We tend to be resentful, right? We feel justified in the phrase going around recently in the world is furious resentment, right? We lash out at people as we perceive them as enemies, and at situations that feel unfair. Anytime something doesn't feel good, we want to find an enemy, we want to find something bad. And the history of the world would tell us to seek vengeance, right? That would be the normal thing. But the prophet in this case says what? Live your best life. Live your best. You are in a terrible circumstance and no one is saying otherwise. You are exiled, we don't like it, you don't like it. But still live your best life. Because we've heard that maybe the best revenge is what? Living your best life. Right? Showing people that you can still love and move and live in the world. The gospel reading today is the story of taking the veneer off of what evil actually looks like in our world. I think we have a preconceived notion of what evil or bad or difficulty looks like. And one of my favorite authors, Henry Nouwen, says this. He helps me reframe for me years ago in the book In the Name of Jesus, which is his book about Christian leadership. And he said these things about it. He said, we understand the temptations of Jesus were a lesson not for everyone, but they are all definitely temptations everyone who has power or leadership faces at one point or another. A challenge that leaders don't serve themselves, but serve others and find their meaning and value in God. And so Jesus has tempted how many leaders are over the years with 3 selfish ways that leadership can go terribly wrong. And he says it this way. He says, Jesus is tempted with these 3 ways: being relevant instead of being faithful, being spectacular instead of being obedient, and being powerful instead of being humble. Instead of doing any of those things, Jesus called out the hypocrisy for what it was. He trashed unjust temple practices. He was hardly civilized, right? And healed those society considered untouchable. Jesus did the opposite of the things that are being requested as a temptation. He healed the lowly. He went to different kinds of people. He didn't make himself spectacular or do power or use God for his own glory, right? He instead healed, cared about the temple injustices, and touched people in a deep and meaningful way. You see, I think when we read about the healings that Jesus did in the Gospels, we often ask the wrong questions, right? When we hear about healings, what is the first thing you kind of think about? You go, did that really happen, right? Like we kind of, you kind of go, oh, that sounds a little far-fetched. I mean, I watch a lot of sci-fi, so maybe it doesn't so much, but like, a little far-fetched. Is that true or is it an exaggeration, right? Rather than asking why Jesus healed or why the healings are included in these writings, why didn't Jesus just gather people in large arenas? No, not the Eras Tour size or even the Super Bowl, but force them to worship God and submit to God's commandments. Like, there's an interesting thing where you think about why Jesus did things and how Jesus did things, and you think, what would be the way that would get the most amount of people saved, right? What would that look like? Like getting them in big crowds and forcing them to do things. Is that what Jesus did, though? He He didn't do those things. He didn't do those things. He didn't cause people to submit. He didn't force people to do things. And so why wasn't Jesus overly powerful or spectacularly popular? Why didn't Jesus put on better shows for the crowds, right? Why didn't Jesus ascend to the earthly throne where he could command armies to overthrow the heathens, right? Why didn't he do those things? Why wasn't he a Jewish nationalist? Oh, why wasn't he a Roman nationalist? Oh, right? Why didn't he do those things? No, Jesus found 12 dudes who, by all accounts, were rejected by their other rabbis. They were off doing the things their families told them to do, right? The different kind of things that their families were into, fishing, tax collecting, all those things. And instead, he looked at those rabble-rousers and said, just follow me. Jesus healed and fed those who couldn't pay him back. Jesus didn't force or coerce his way into power. He healed, he fed, he loved. I sometimes don't recognize the Jesus that some people when people call themselves Christians, talk about these days. I don't understand this need for someone who says they follow Jesus to then force a sort of form of Christianity onto others through might or government or other resources. I don't understand that because when I read the Gospels, when I read the teachings of Jesus, I understand that no church is perfect, no community gets it all right, no Christian has ever been exactly who Jesus is. But I kind of wonder at the idea of what power looks like and who Jesus is supposed to be in our lives when we actually read and follow the Gospels. And so I think during this season, reframing what we view as church success or Christians that are good or Christians that are helpful or evangelism, right? The word evangelism, I know, gets a bad rap as well. I was an evangelical, so I get it. We can be a little forceful. But it just simply means sharing the good news. That's all evangelism means. Of course, the good news has become not so good sometimes, right? It feels like. But what does it look like for evangelism or those things to be successful? And maybe we have understood it all wrong a bit. Maybe a successful church or a good moment of evangelism is simply the place where you excavate the community and there are healed bones. Where you excavate the church and people are healed, not hurt. Where you excavate that community and you find civilization in the healing. What does it look like for a church not to be spectacular, not to use power in unwieldy and improper ways, not to only think of ourselves, turning stones into whatever, right? But what does it look like for us to simply be the people who walk alongside other folks to ensure that they are safe during moments of healing? When someone is broken, you don't just say, well, God, you should have been more faithful. You should have asked that different question. I'm going to judge you, right? Instead, you look at that person who is hurt and you walk alongside them. You wrap up their bones. You wrap up their wounds. And in your own sense of unsafety, you stay behind with them and make sure they are okay. What if church, not unlike civilization, was excavated for the healing it did rather than the hurt it caused? Church isn't a place of guilt or obligation. It's a place of healing and joy, in my opinion, or it should be. A place where we help each other dream a better world together. It's why our Lenten focus is imagination, this idea of what it looks like for us to turn our mind, even in the darkest of times, like in the book of Jeremiah when they are exiled and it is dark and it is terrible and you could tell they are. They can't even conceive maybe of what it would look like to lay down roots in this exiled place, and yet that's exactly what God tells them to do, the thing that seems the weirdest thing to do. I understand why MLK said, I have a dream. When the reality is tough, sometimes all we have to keep us going are our dreams. So on Friday, I went to an event where we talked a little bit about what it means to resist in this idea of authoritarianism or the things that are going on. I know ICE is going to ramp back up in Chicago, so what do we do together? And one of the things that was told for us is that authoritarians actually fear joy and they fear imagination. They don't fear Christians, but they fear those who read the Bible and actually follow the teachings of Jesus. They don't fear the religious. They fear those who take seriously the love of God and love of neighbor. They fear artists and creatives. They fear our joy and our accomplishments and our generosity. So I was reminded this week that no matter what happens, we keep working, we keep living, we keep loving, we keep giving generously, we keep creating beauty, we keep watering our flowers. Well, not now, apparently, but last weekend we could have. We keep telling the truth. We keep showing up. We look for what is going on, and we plant ourselves in the city, plant ourselves where we are. And we love those people in those situations because we're showing up for each other. And I think that's what rooted resistance means. It means we are all connected. We are all interconnected, and actually looking at that and reminding ourselves we're not as separate as we think we are, or if other people are trying to make us feel like this neighbor is less than and that neighbor is less than, our LGBTQ neighbors are less than. We resist that and we say, nope, those are God's beloveds. My neighbor, undocumented, God's beloveds. My neighbor, the refugee, God's beloved. And that is what resistance looks like. That is what it means to live into the imagination, the dream of a better world that God has for us. Jeremiah gave it kind of a specifics, right? Plant yourself in that city. And what he's saying is intermarry, right? Like kind of give yourself to this place. Even though you didn't want to be here, even though this is not what we want. I think oftentimes we're in situations and we spend too much time, as a friend of mine said, admiring the problem. Oh, I'm in this place. I don't like it. Right? Grumble, grumble, grumble. I have to take my shoes off. Ugh, right? Rather than going like, I am on a plane to look at a new job. How exciting is this, right? We forget to take a moment, to take a step back from our frustrations. And even if we are even if we can actually be frustrated, and it is actually a frustrating thing, be frustrated, but then take a breath and go, but I'm here. And I'm going to show up, and that's how we resist. That's how we find joy. That's how in Lent we are going to tune our imaginations to a better world that's possible and how we are going to enact that world into being. And so I hope that you will journey with us, whether online or whether in person, that you will journey with us as we use our imaginations to think through what it means for us to be people who follow the way of Jesus deeply and well. That we are people who heal bones. We are people who stand beside those who are hurt. We are people who march or speak or pray or sing or listen or speak in such a way that we find ourselves being healers instead of hurters. May we all be reminded that we are rooted. We are all together in this. That God is here, God is present, God is love. And may we continue to show up for each other because this world needs us now more than ever. Amen.